Good afternoon to everyone here today. It is my pleasure to welcome you all to our webinar, Taking Diversity in Business to the Top. Before I start, I would like to begin by thanking our panelists, our moderator, Dr. Melissa Langworthy, who will be moderating today's workshop, and our speakers, Ms. Aisha Rawiyat and Ms. Belinda Scott, all of whom have taken time from their busy schedule to participate in this webinar and impart their extensive knowledge of diversity and inclusion in the economy. We are grateful for your support of our activities and mandate, and we look forward to learning from you very shortly. For many of you that are familiar with the PAL Initiative, you'll know that we are the leading and only independent non-profit organisation founded to promote the business case for the implementation of the highest standards of corporate governance, transparency and accountability across the Gulf region's private sector. Launched in 2010 in cooperation with the United Nations Office for Partnerships, the PAL Initiative aims to convene businesses, decision makers and future young leaders to take the lead in promoting and implementing greater governance standards. The PAL Initiative also engages with a wider business ecosystem in the Gulf region and collaborates with over 30 regional universities and over 40 companies to collectively drive our mission forward. We work as a think tank and build data by publishing cutting-edge research reports and case studies to inspire business change. The business case for diversity is a topic of great discussion both globally and regionally, and in the last few years, regional companies have increasingly begun to understand the value that promoting and increasing diversity in the workplace has for improved business productivity. Global studies have repeatedly demonstrated the utility that increased diversity has for businesses and their outputs. However, we do continue to observe that businesses have a long way to go in promoting diversity within their ranks, and particularly in ensuring that the women who work within them are supported in a manner that benefits their careers. Stemming from this, in 2014, the PAL Initiative launched the Diversity in Business Leadership Programme. The programme builds upon the fact that good corporate governance encompasses a rigorous system spanning all aspects of accountability in business practices, including diversity in the workforce, which subsequently leads to improved business outcomes such as increased innovation, higher revenues, and an improved work culture. Much has been said about the necessity of supporting women in the workplace and the business and moral case for the same. Such a change, however, can only come about with the support of senior management and leaders within a given company. The tone from the top is essential to ensure women feel included and appreciated at their work, and for employees to make gender equality a top priority at all levels of the company. This is all the more important now with the impact of COVID-19 on the workforce and with women often pulling double shifts to balance domestic work and employment simultaneously. So what can senior management do to support women in their workforces, and how can these changes be carried over into a post-COVID world? The webinar will aim to explain the necessity for increased women in leadership positions, how senior management can be held accountable for D&I messaging and outcomes, particularly in light of COVID-19, and how companies can establish goals and targets to track and measure D&I results across all levels and departments. It is now my pleasure to welcome and introduce Dr. Melissa Langworthy, our moderator for today. Dr. Langworthy is a feminist economist focusing on women, work and entrepreneurship across the Gulf region. She has consulted with the American University of Beirut, the Kuwait Women's Union, the EU Policy Outreach Partnership, ENV and the Kuwait Foundation for the Advancement of Science, and is a research affiliate with Ladysmith. Her current research focuses on the relationship between women's empowerment, entrepreneurship and the rentier state. Dr. Langworthy, welcome. Thank you for being here, and we certainly look forward to this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Yasmin. Welcome, everyone, all of our lovely attendees, and especially to our distinguished panelists, whom I have the honor to introduce. So Ms. Aisha Rawiyat is an award-winning ICF certified executive, leadership and life coach, speaker, author, culture, and HR strategy consultant. In addition to being a professional coach, Aisha leads culture, employee experience, and employer brand at Emirates Integrated Telecommunications Company, and is responsible for driving the Culture Transformation Program, developing a high-performance organization, promoting engagement, collaboration, diversity, and inclusion and tolerance across the organization. Aisha also spearheads the organizational alignment with the future of work through employee experience and the integration of design thinking into organizational process frameworks. Throughout her career, Aisha has positively influenced 3 business sectors critical to UAE's economic development: telecommunications, metals and mining and tourism. She draws on 20+ years of experience in marketing, sales, operations, operating at board level from multinationals to startups, headquarters to operational units in products, services, operations, and human resource activities to prove insights, strategies, and support to clients. And our second distinguished panelist is Belinda Scott, VP and Head of Corporate Sustainability at First Abu Dhabi Bank. Belinda is responsible for developing and implementing the bank's corporate sustainability strategy with oversight for the bank's sustainable finance and ESG performance. Belinda also acts as the sustainability advisor to the bank and its group businesses. Belinda is also a member of the Women's Empowerment and Equality Board, an initiative spearheaded by Her Highness Sheikha Shama bin Sultan bin Khalifa Al Nahyan, and holds a postgraduate certificate in sustainable business from the University of Cambridge Institute for Sustainability Leadership. So now that I think we've hit every keyword in every business textbook ever published, I welcome you, ladies, and thank you. Thank you for participating today. So we have a lot that we want to talk about. So I'm just going to jump right in with a question as far number one, what do you see as the current tone from the corporate leadership when it comes to promoting diversity? And either one may talk.
I should go.
Sure, Belinda, please start us off.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna sort of reference my role on the Private Sector Advisory Council to the UN, the UAE's Council on SDGs, because we've been doing some work with the Gender Diversity Council on SDG 5 to get the private sector more involved. And I think that you know, there's some interesting things that are coming out. I think that you know, the corporate tone is that yes, there needs to be something done with this, but there's still a lack, I think, and I'm talking regionally here. You know, exactly what is it? And there's you know, a challenge around the context of how, you know, the regional needs of diversity intersect with cultural and society norms, and how we go about doing that here, so that we actually are addressing the things that are relevant to us, that matter in the context of the region and the UAE, rather than just trying to lift out what's going on globally and overlaying it. So I think that there's a recognition that we need to do more. Highest corporate level know that we need to do stuff, but there's still that lack of clarity of what is it that we actually need to do. And I think that's some of that we'll address in some of the later points.
Yeah. And maybe if I can add to this what Belinda has said as well, I think what is very positive in the current movement is that the tone which we're seeing from the leadership is very encouraging. I think the leadership is waking up. We're seeing a lot of care, a lot of focus on mental health support provided, especially in the current ecosystem of COVID-19. So the language which is coming out from so many different leaders across on the global sector as well as here in the UAE, it's very encouraging, looking at the employee as to how can we support them, what needs to happen. You need to have them productive, to have them healthy. So I think that's something very positive which came out of this situation overall. And this encouraging, caring aspect, I think it's very nice. I mean, we saw so many different initiatives, from whether it is from the government and sending the messages, even providing certain flexibilities to certain groups, which might need a little bit more care, whether it is so many organizations opening and launching employee assistance program with mental health facilities, with financial aid, with legal aid to help them through this particular situation. ADNOC just launched the 20 Women 2020 and the Aurora 50 initiative. So a lot of positive things are coming out right now. I think it's a very, very nice time to be in, and we need to now accelerate this part of shift going forward into the direction of diversity and inclusion, and see how we can solidify that and accelerate and scale.
So now you both work with, some very high level, operators and businesses. Do you think that you've seen, has this situation imparted an awareness of an immediateness of the claims that have been made by especially women as far as balancing work and home? Do you think that the immediacy that's been experienced in the last few months has helped to push forward? Have you seen that these top leaders are either more engaged or more willing to take these steps?
I think there's progress. Now, are we already there? No, I don't think we're there yet, but I think there is progress. I think a lot of very, very senior leaders are making it a priority and trying to wake up as well the middle management to try to cascade the message. Guys, I think we need to do things a little bit differently from here onwards. So yeah, I think it's a start, right? We have work to do. Many senior leaders are jumping onto the ship, so we can see positive movements coming forward, and now we need to bring it forward and accelerate it through the organizations and cascade it down onto each and every single level.
I absolutely agree with Aisha. I think that there's more recognition around the need to implement diversity and inclusion practices within organizations. I think that, like she said, the leadership of the country is doing a great job. And how does that then translate down into the private sector? And I think that some of the challenges are quite interesting because, you know, the UAE and the Gulf region is quite unique. I mean, it crosses over from being quite a traditionalist society or societies and cultures to, you know, an economic modernity that is really driving the change. And how do we address diversity and inclusion where it's coming at us left, right and centre from overseas, and balance that to make it contextual and relevant to us here? So I think that, you know, there's a lot of work to be done, but we're also moving very, very quickly. I think that, you know, we're still a new if we look at all of the countries in the region, we're still new, and we're addressing this now. It took, you know, countries in the, you know, the global north, for example, they addressed this, you know, they've been looking at it for many years. So I think that there is that momentum. It's just, you know, how do we get it right, and how do we contextualize it to make it meaningful for us in this region?
Wonderful. Well, so let's take this step by step. Let's start by talking about the level of diversity currently at the corporate leadership level. Where do you think we stand, and where should we be going, right? What are these insights that you're talking about, Belinda, that you've been gathering, and how do they apply to the corporate leadership level? Well,
you know, we've got things like board diversity. So if I touch on the one that everybody's been talking about, and some of the conversations that I've had actually beyond the region have been quite interesting. And so if I look at it through a sustainability lens as well, one of the things that many of the organizations here are getting challenged about is board diversity. And, you know, have we got the right women? And, you know, governance is such a deep subject, but if we're looking at it in terms of diversifying and having, you know, a more equal gender balance, parity within the boards, I think that there's enormous pressure externally for the private sector companies to get people onto those boards. But then, you know, you have got the issues, and I've been talking to people that are beyond not necessarily in this region, but I've been talking to organisations like Aviva and investor groups, and they point out also that regions such as Singapore and some of these countries are also experiencing the same sort of challenges. So I don't think that what we're going through is anything different to what's being experienced elsewhere. But I think that the rate that women are having access onto boards isn't necessarily moving as quickly as it might. But having said that, there's a lot of work that's being done, like Aisha said, with ADNOC, with Her Highness Sheikh Hashama, and many organisations within the UAE that are actually trying to build that preparedness of women. So what's the pipeline there, and how do we start preparing those women so that they can take those roles and actually they're meaningful and we're not just ticking the box? I think that there's still a lot of work to be done with the existing boards as they are now, and you know, we can dive into things like unconscious bias and all sorts of things, but you know, how do we actually prepare the women, and what is it that we need to do to start moving them upwards, and what is it that they need, but how do we work with men to facilitate that, because we can't do it without men. So, you know, we're not going to get anywhere.
Aisha?
Yeah, and I think it is about really, it needs to start from the top, right? If we wanted to integrate it into the organization, it is a board, it is a CEO who needs to be on board and who needs to drive it, right? Because if you shift it from bottom up, it's not going to work, right? We need to integrate it into the balanced scorecard. We need to integrate it into the performance management of individual. It needs to be ingrained into the DNA of every single individual within the organization. And of course, as Belinda mentioned, it doesn't happen without the men. There are still a lot of men, so we need to pick the right ladies. What are the right, and if we want to shift the needle in terms of gender balance and bring more ladies to the top, more females to the top, what are the right ladies? What criteria are we looking for? And then who can we support them in their personal development to really excel and reach their potential in whatever form, right? And I think to give them the platform to enable them and to work with the senior leaders within the organization to help them, to guide them, to mentor them and coach them upwards and provide them the right skills and expertise, exposure, I think that is a critical element as well to move forward.
So you've both mentioned this idea of kind of what the women need or how they need to be supported, right, to create this environment. So when we think about an effective tone from the top, how do you see the inclusion of that support or the acknowledgement of the needs of, you know, of the women that we're looking to elevate? How do you see the two working together, how the tone can shape the supportive programming?
So,
I think that,
go ahead.
Sorry. No, go, Aisha, go.
So
Please,
I think it's about listening, being transparent and be authentic. It's not just about talking about it, but doing the right things, right? I mean, like, for example, we just went, maybe many people know, we just went to a major leadership shift in our organization right now, right? We have just promoted our first female as into the senior leadership level. So these are signs, right, which the leadership is setting. It's like, you know what, this is what I want to see within my organization, even if it's only one, right? But so far there is a priority put on that, and it's integrated, it's cascaded, it's reinforced in every single action and every single behavior that we do, and then putting it very clearly out there. You know what, if you don't do the right things, if you don't see the right things, then we will coach you along the way, but eventually you will need to adapt, right, to make that part of your key criteria. I mean, we're looking at sustainable organizations as a whole, as inclusive organizations as a whole. It needs to be integrated and lived. It needs to be tangible, and we need to talk about it in ways that make sense, not just on aspirational basis, but on a practical basis.
Wonderful. Belinda.
So, sorry, I'm just thinking about how challenging it is, and you know, if we're sort of looking at trying to create a level playing field for all employees, so that gender diversity becomes, you know, something that's ingrained. It's understanding what from the management, what needs to be implemented to create that level playing field, and it isn't, you know, about equality, it's about equity. So it's sort of recognizing that there's an issue and then actually taking action to do something about it. So I think that it goes, you know, deep into the culture. It's the management, the senior management or the top of organizations, they need to reflect on how an organization with strong gender diversity and strong diversity of its workforce actually enhances the performance of an organization. It's, you know, it's good in terms of its bottom line, its economic performance, its risk in so many levels. And then I think that you know, they do need to reflect and understand what the barriers are, and then how they need to be removed. And I think that it's key. One of the key things is that senior management need to sponsor. They need to sponsor the women that are coming up, they act as sponsors, and that the women with it that are trying to climb that ladder and reach positions that actually give them the opportunity to grow are also given that empowerment. So I think that there's a lot of work to be done. It's not about doing everything all at once. It's about, you know, recognizing and plotting a pathway to doing it so that it becomes meaningful, because you've got to create that culture shift, and developing a culture doesn't happen overnight, as Aisha will be probably much more better to talk about, you know, that sort of thing. But yeah, I think that fundamentally, unless you can create that culture shift and then bring the management in and say, you are the sponsors of this, and empower them in that way, and set those expectations, you know, it's key to moving things forward.
Aisha, do you want to respond to speak to what Belinda said?
Yeah, I mean, I think Belinda framed it very nicely. I mean, it needs to be ingrained into your culture. So how does this diversity fit into your purpose as an organization? How do you want to be seen?
Yeah.
How does it fit into the values? How are the values executed and lived on every single level? And how can we create the journey for the leadership as well as the employees to take them along, to build this cohesive story for them as to why is it important? So it's not only about compliance, right? I'm the government, I'm putting a target for you. You need to have that many people at the board and that many people in the senior leadership. When we do the compliance path, it becomes a number game, right? And I'm not necessarily then promoting the right females into the right positions. I mean, if we talk gender balance, it goes both ways, right? We have departments who have female majority, we have departments, we have man majority. So we need to look at what do both genders need, and to both sides, how we can really create this diversity. And as Belinda mentioned, it's about the equity game, right? There's a lot of benefit for us to create this diversity. We've seen it with language, we've seen it with race, we've seen it with color, and the same goes for gender. If we can really showcase the innovations that are coming out from there, that there are better solutions, that makes absolute business sense to have diverse teams, and how different genders even approach solutions differently. Right, in an organization, and what we can learn from there to streamline our organization and help us to propel us forward with different solutions that then even drive revenues out, whether it is process enhancements, whether it is products, whatever it is we're looking at, right? I mean, there's so much we can learn from both sides, and I think it's about showcasing those opportunities, speaking as well, you know, to the aspects of, you know, you have daughters, how are they going to be perceived going forward? Wouldn't you want them to have equal opportunities? What would happen if your daughter would go through these kind of challenges, what women in your department, for example, are facing, right? Or how can we make it easier for them? Be an example, and for your own children, bring them in, get them committed and vested into that course. I think that is key. Once you have the buy-in, then it becomes much easier, you know, to take people along the journey. Then we can help them with listening opportunities, whether it is pulse surveys, whether it is focus groups, you know, to establish and see what's happening in certain areas and respond accordingly in a customized solution.
Of course. Well, you both spoke very eloquently on both the business case, right, for diversity and inclusion, but also the moral shifts, right, as far as organizational culture and the rationale behind it. But somewhere within the scope, you know, the scope of these activities is the idea of critical mass, right? A quota, potentially 30% or more, that is utilized as a tool, a process tool to help us achieve those changes. So how do you see that working in a corporate environment, and how does a corporate leadership member or body go about approaching it in the way that's going to facilitate change?
See, I mean, this quota of 30%, yeah, I've heard about it, right? And yeah, it's nice. like if we look at our organization, yeah, okay, we're nearly there, right, as a whole organization. But the challenge is not on the quota as a whole organization. I think we need to look at the levels, right? Break it down by bands. So how much percentage do we have in the senior leadership? Whether the bottom line? What are the challenges that we're seeing in intake and promotions and performance reviews, right? To really address biases which are there and to address challenges that the genders face when they move through the career path within an organization. So to have one quota of 30% as a whole organization, I'm not sure how feasible that is. I have not seen so much success in there. I think it's really looking at individual departments, individual bands, and try to really dig deep and identify what are the root causes that are preventing shifts. Right? Listening to people and see what are the challenges that they are facing in that particular area, and then empowering them with the right tools to move forward. The quota is nice to put it onto a balanced scorecard to hold people accountable from the top, but again, it's a compliance aspect. You will not get the buy-in from people. They don't see the why, and I think that will always drive wrong behaviors in my personal opinion.
Right, and it doesn't necessarily address that organizational culture, right? As far as you can meet the quota,
Exactly.
But what is that the group environment, right, for the workforce, and how enabling will that ultimately be? Belinda?
I think that yeah, exactly. It's very interesting, you know, quotas, because when you're trying to apply them to an organization is very it's not a simple, you know, unit of a few people. They are often they're complex. They're small societies, and you've got all sorts of things that could you know, that have to be taken into account. So if we're just saying diversity and you're looking at gender diversity, but then you've got within that gender diversity a diversity within itself of different, especially in this part of the world, nationalities, yes. Skill sets. Cultural issues, all sorts of things that actually don't make it simplistic to just, you know, that easy to just sort of have a blanket target. So to be able to make something meaningful, it goes back to, again, the culture, the change, the all of the way that the organization works. Because you've got to understand what's going on within your workforce to be able to move them up. And if you've got, excuse me, for example, a load of women that have come over and they're working because their husbands have come here and they've got young children, and they're saying, well, do you know what, we only want to just have a job to keep us going while the children are small, and then we'll start looking, you know, to move up the ladder or things. Then, you know, trying to get a quota isn't necessarily relevant because you've got a workforce. So you need to sort of understand all the complexity that's going on within your organization to sort of bring about that change that is meaningful. Because if you're just trying to blanket targets and all of these things, it doesn't actually change that whole culture and mindset and get rid of the challenges that are there, because you're not addressing those underlying issues.
Very true. And I think this also gets to the point of you know, our discussion earlier about, you know, what is global and what is localizable, right? What is it that we can actually use? And that does more than just culture. That also goes to your organization, right? Understanding your organization operates within the global and regional forces is one thing, but I think you guys have both hit it on the head with the idea of your business, like your actual organization will have its own distinct issues and needs, and really one of the best tools is really understanding what you said, right? What part of the workforce culture needs to change, what are the root causes for your particular workforce and employees, and how does that shift by department, as you said, Aisha, or role. So wonderful, simple way to present some very complex ideas, ladies. I would like to shift us now just to kind of, now that we really have that framing, what does this mean in a COVID and post-COVID world? You know, if we are as organizations just getting a handle on these mechanisms for diversity and inclusion with the way things were done, what are the potential kind of opportunities and pitfalls then in this new normal, right? And in the ways in which work is shifting, and as you see, it will continue to shift as we continue to deal with the pandemic and its fallout.
So
more challenges, more opportunities. Where do you fall at the moment?
Again, I would say it's individually, right? I mean, not everybody is a mom, not everybody has children, right? So we have moms, we have single parents, we have people who are not married, we have without children, we have single dads. So I think the challenges which came out of the COVID situation were unique to each and every single individual. I think what it gave to us, it's an opportunity to rethink as to how do we want to work and what is it that we can do, because we just took something for granted, right? I mean, our life was we go to the office 9 to 5 or longer, okay, come home, see the kids maybe for half an hour, have dinner, make them sleep, and then we go sleep. And that was my life personally, right? I mean, other people have it a little bit differently. Now, when we sit at home now in this home office, okay, we have the opportunity to be with the children throughout the day whenever they need us, take breaks whenever we need them, okay, and then continue working, even if it's until 12 o'clock in the nighttime. But we take breaks when it's required, right? When it's needed. We can have lunches suddenly with the family, right? And when we're there for them. I see what's happening in the house, you know, in all different environments. So it personally gives me much more freedom to be a mom and to have a career in the same time, to work from home. So that's something I would like to take forward. Yeah, maybe yes, I would like to. And there are opportunities maybe where I want to go once or twice into the office or have a meeting and so on. So I think it is opening doors for us to rethink the way we want to work. It's opening opportunities for organizations as well to rethink as to how they want to progress. I mean, we see so many organizations who say, you know what, we don't want you to come back because it's much more economic to us, right? I mean, we save facilities, we save on service personnel. There are a lot of cost savings involved, Yanni, which are also allowing us to be flexible. How do we move forward with leaves? So I think there is a new spirit of creating something new out of this crisis, right? So everybody has taken a break now, a step back, and said, okay, now we experienced this, we experienced that before. What is it that we truly want or need for us at this particular stage, whether it's an organization or an individual, and then co-create it. There's a lot of communication that needs to happen, I think, on all fronts. And I saw that a lot during this particular crisis, whether it is me with a line manager, whether it's the leadership to the employees, whether it's me with my husband or my children. You know, it's like when we need help, we have to communicate. And I think that we became so much better in communication through this crisis, Yanni. So it brought us closer together. So if I cannot do something right now, it's up to me, you know, not to get stressed and say, okay, I need everything to be perfect. This needs to happen right now. How I manage it? Oh no, I said, now I'm at work. I need this time right now. I will be with you after that particular meeting, and I can look at your homework, or you know, these things that happened, Yanni. But this communication, I think, has brought us closer as a family, has brought me closer as well to my organization in a sense, because I can understand them much better. I have much better conversations right now suddenly. So yeah, I see it as an opportunity for us to really create something nice out of that, whether it is for women, for men, or for basically every single person to create his unique work life the way he would like to see it.
That sounds very optimistic. So Belinda, do you follow Aisha's assessment of the circumstances?
I think that what's been interesting, particularly to me, is the way that the world and the region especially has been able to grasp the new technology and digital work, and you know, change the way that we're working. And I think that out of this, when organizations reflect, they're going to see that there's vast amounts of opportunity to moving towards a more blended style of working, and that's perhaps, you know, because you enable people to use their strengths. And I think that it could also open up the opportunity to draw in talent that could work remotely but couldn't necessarily work you know, in an office setting, you know, having to travel every day. So I think that there's a massive opportunity to consider all of the positiveness that could come out. I mean, obviously we know that there's been a lot of challenges, but where like what Aisha was saying, it gives her the chance to sort of do a lot more, get a balanced approach to work. It's also I think that it's been surprising for organizations to see just actually how effective it is, how they can become more efficient, how they can reduce costs. I mean, if I give an example, my daughter works for a law firm in London, and they did a survey of all of their staff, and as a result, they're going to continue to work remotely, which means for them, they can actually reduce their office size significantly. The cost savings that they've said that they will save from that will go into employee development and skill building. So the thing is that there's so much there, and I think that it will drive more development in terms of online platform development and ability to work more remotely, because, you know, we just got it. We've been using systems of working that we've had for many years, and now this is sort of like almost brought us to a catalyst of where do we go next and how can we build on the benefits of this more effectively. So I think that, you know, there's definitely an opportunity to broaden out the reach to bringing on people that giving access to work because we can work in different ways, and, you know, to sort of move away from those traditional methods and be more creative and innovative.
Wonderful. So when we think about these trends that we're discussing and how we think they're going to carry over or inform like new patterns of working in the future, how do you see then the role of the organization specifically regarding its female workers, right? When we're adapting to this new area of work, but including that within kind of the gender and diversity roles based on what we knew before. Where do you see that there's areas to synthesize these two movements, again, to accelerate progress, so to speak? Where do you see challenges?
Belinda, you want to go first?
Yeah, so no, that's fine. So, you know, I think that the whole thing is that if we're going to do this new way of, we're going to have this new way of working, I think first of all, it's, you know, you can have this conversation with women. I know that there's been issues. There's been a lot in the press about, you know, a woman works all day on her laptop, finishes at 5 o'clock, and then she starts her unpaid job, you know, wife and housekeeper and, you know, all of that. In fact, it's not even as simple as that, because even yourself, Melissa, and Aisha, you've got young children, so you're educators in the day as well as having your day job, and then you've got to sort of blend that in. But the thing is that if we're going to sort of do this right, isn't it? I would question: is it about playing to people's strengths? So, for example, you might have some commitments in the day, but you might naturally be a person that works more effectively between, unless you're a customer-facing person that has to be online at a certain time. Actually, could we not move to you working during the hours that actually play to your strengths? So if you're more switched on between 5 and midnight, then actually isn't that the time that you could potentially work? So I think that it would open up an awful lot of opportunities for women that maybe, you know, need to focus on other things during the day, but also allow women that haven't necessarily been part of the workforce to bring in their knowledge, or people that may be saying that I'm on a work break because I want to bring up my children. If I can work remotely, actually, I'd like to be able to contribute. So I think that there's a lot of opportunities to bring women more into those roles. And one of the benefits that I've found myself is that because you're not spending all this time on traveling, you've got opportunities to get online and actually find out what's going on in the world beyond your own work thing, and to understand some of these issues that we're discussing here today, so that you can actually bring those conversations back into the workplace and start having some interesting conversations with your management and leadership. Again, it goes back to, you know, how do we have those conversations, and how do we start to bring that awareness in? So if you've got, what I find is very interesting in this part of the world is because we've got such a diverse workforce of many nationalities. When you've got people that are coming in with new ideas, and the more that happens, you are creating a systemic change within the organization to start thinking in a slightly different way anyway. Even if you're a bit resistant, it's starting to put those seeds of change. So, you know, if you've got the time also to start understanding, you can start having those conversations. And I would say also that sometimes there might be instances where if you're not, you might feel more comfortable talking remotely about some difficult issues than you would if you were face to face in the office. So, you know, let's understand some of those opportunities there and use them to drive this movement forward.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
It seems like simultaneously, potentially the people that you'll be talking to in your organization will be more receptive. It seems that now that all the, you know, we've knocked down the walls of that we're looking for a new normal, we understand that the old ways don't fit anymore. It might actually be a very apt time to start visualizing different solutions, right? Considering different ways of doing things that potentially prior to this, there would have been more resistance to.
Exactly,
Yeah, and I mean, I think the opportunities lie there as well for the organizations, right? Imagine on this space now, if people don't have to come to physical office anymore to work. You basically can tap into the talent regardless of where they are placed within the world, right? So you're not restricted anymore to a particular geographic area. So you have a much wider access to talent as an organization. So what does that do to you as an organization as well, right? Now, if we talk maternity leave, that was usually one of these biggest discussed areas, right? When we come into the gender diversity aspect, how can I bring it all together? Well, if I can work from home, I can nurse my child and, you know, still work in between. And so it doesn't really stop me from engaging into the workplace. It doesn't stop my career because I have to now look after my kids. So as I said, I think there are a lot of opportunities as well to bring in more women to the workforce, and it's up to us now as an organization as well as individuals to understand what is it that we really want and need and how we create that forward and have those conversations, as Belinda said, with the leadership, within our people, and as well the wider organization and the communities.
Wonderful. Well, ladies, thank you so much. I think that at this point, I'd love to open it up for questions from our participants and see if we can answer any thriving questions. If anyone would like to contribute, Shruti is going to be facilitating the questions.
Hi, everyone. This is Shruti from the Pearl Initiative. I'd encourage you all to use the questions or the chat function to send through your questions to the panelists, and I'll read them out. Alternatively, if you'd like to raise your hand and speak directly with the panelists, we can enable that as well. Could I kick off with a question, please? So thank you very much for your insights. It's been a fascinating conversation. At the end of this, now that we've talked about what it's like to potentially return to the workplace and the impacts of COVID-19, what is it that you think companies should be changing in terms of concrete policies to welcome people into the workplace with comfort, particularly women?
Can I go first?
Please.
I'm quite happy to. I think that it's about choice. I think that if organizations can recognize that, you know, that a person, and, you know, definitely a woman, and I think that the government has set some excellent framework for that, is that, you know, people going back to work, you know, if they're women with children in grade 9 or below, they don't need to be the first wave of people back into the office. But I think that it goes back to, you know, an organisation taking the time to understand the contribution that their workforce can make beyond the office environment, and therefore giving women the opportunity to you know, try out different, it could be that you try out different ways of working. So it could, if they're not comfortable with saying, okay, well, do you know what, you can carry on working from home, it's saying, okay, well, you know what, there's a staggered return to start off with, let's test some things out. So once things are back to whatever the new normal is, do you need to be part of the office again, or can you actually continue to work from home, or do you want to come in? And that, so I think it's about giving women the flexibility, because you know what your own working style is, and what your level of contribution and delivery is. And I think that organisations are able to see that now, and line managers are able to see that. So I think it is about, you know, having a transition while you seriously consider, you know, what does that new normal look like for female employees, and dependent also on the role specifically. So I hope that helps.
I would like to add as well the element of performance management over here, right? I mean, if we look at our region, we are most advanced in terms of our digital ecosystem, but we were least advanced, at least until COVID-19 happened, in the terms of flexible working, yani whether it is working from home and truly utilizing the infrastructure that we have created in this region. So how do we bring it back into performance management as well? The element which I'm trying to touch base here is on the mindset of leadership. Do I really need to see my staff sitting in front of me all the time to know that they are working? Or how can we bring it back to managing through objectives? So what are my expectations? Belinda, Melissa, what I want from you in the end of the day, what are the deliverables I would like to expect from you, okay? And then establishing this trust that, yes, you know what, I know my stuff is working, I know they're not sitting in front of me, but I know they're producing and they are delivering to the best of their abilities. I think that is an important element, and that I think would be one of the first mindset shifts which I would go through in the organization, you know, to drive that rather than policies. I think we're too early for policy changes. We're still in trial and error, and then we have to go through numerous iterations and pilots to see, okay, what is it that we would actually like to cement in a policy? So keep it flexible, have these conversations, listen in, okay, try out different methods. And then once we stabilize and say, okay, this is what we want for our organization, then go ahead with cementing it into policies.
Well, and I think that that's also true for women, to see what women want, because we talked a lot today about facilitating balance, but sometimes that balance is really difficult, especially when you're not away from the home, right? For me, it's salvation to be able to leave and then just focus on work, personally, right? So the potential of losing that, right, could actually be quite stressful, and then having to stretch the hours to be able to bounce back and forth. So I think we also need to be careful, you know, as we do test these experiences, right, how that does play into the paid and unpaid work balance and the totality of what we're expecting women to do.
Absolutely.
Can I just add one other thing? I just that what's one of the key, and I think it goes back to what you've just said, Melissa, is actually one of the key things that would be wonderful to come out of COVID, if you know, companies were open to it, is actually to get a sense of what is an employee's expectation from their employer, so that they can deliver and do a good day's work, but that meets their needs as well. Because then when you've got that level of trust, you're going to be much more productive. So I think that if organizations were after, you know, in this new normal or whatever it is, that as we come out through this time, is that they can be more receptive to understanding, you know, what their employees' expectations are from their employer as well. This would move us significantly forward in this way, I think, towards achieving that sense of diversity and inclusion.
Or at least shifting perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wonderful. Shruti, do we have any other questions?
We do indeed.
Wonderful.
Dr. Alawiya Alui has asked, in terms of flexi working, for service organizations or other organizations where work from home is possible, it's great. However, for manufacturing sectors and others in that line, this would be almost impossible if not challenging. How can these sectors work around that?
Well, I think I can answer that question, Yanni. I would love to answer that question. Well, look, you're absolutely spot on. Certain sectors or certain roles, I wouldn't even say sectors, it's certain roles who are not cut out to work from home or, you know, be part of this flexible working, just because they require manual labor or physical presence, whether you're a salesperson in a retail shop, or whether it is a construction worker outside, or, you know, the IT technicians who has to come and fix my laptop, yani, physically. So I think I would go through it from a job evaluation aspect. So which rules are actually applicable and which one can we make flexible and work from home, and which one do we need to exclude because they really require the physical presence, and that means because it's really requiring the labor in front of the customer or on site.
I'd add that one of my concerns in terms of looking at that through a sustainability lens is the use of technology and artificial intelligence in manufacturing, and how, you know, we're seeing increasingly that a lot of manual work will be replaced by machines or by robots or whatever that might be automated. That's not obviously true in every aspect, but there will be a change there, and maybe that's where we start to look again at transitioning people from being in their traditional roles to adapting to what new technology and digitization and automation will bring. But I agree. I think that what it's trying to do. I think what we need to do is we need to rethink how flexibility can be fitted into all roles, whatever they are. But you probably can't do you can't come in and say, okay, well, everybody here can work. You know, if you're working in an office or you're working in a factory or in a production plant, that flexibility is going to be the same. But it is about actually how you work with your employees and give them that flexibility within their role to actually have that work-life balance, I think.
Mm. And I think in the immediate term, we're looking at flexibility and safety, right? If
Yes,
that needs to be physically present, then there are certain safety considerations that need to be considered. Shruti, do we have another question?
Yes.
Good.
So Ms. Mona Al-Nahdi is asking, most leadership needs continuous travel. In the event that women can't travel due to cultural barriers or family responsibilities, how can she still pursue a leadership position and discuss alternatives with her organization?
That is a nice question. Actually, just 2 days ago, I saw a survey in which all the Fortune 500 CEOs were questioned. You know, what are the new trends coming out of COVID-19? And one of the major outputs was related to work travel. And there is an expectation that there's a significant reduction in the requirements of travel due to the technologies which we're seeing now. I mean, we're having this panel discussion through a webinar, right? And all of us had to adapt very quickly to all the different technological aspects which allowed us to work from home. So I think, again, there's an opportunity for us, you know, now to really dive into these areas which were previously not accessible to us, maybe because of these cultural restrictions, because now we have a much more choices, and then really leave it to the individual and say, okay, where is it truly required that I need to go and travel, and then what are the elements that would not require travel, and have these discussions as well on that front. But personally, I see that there is an opportunity on that front to bring in different talents from different areas and overcome that barrier as well through the means of technology.
Agreed. I think that there's also been some research on the one of the challenges is that women prefer to do networking and meetings during the day, and where men are quite happy to go and have meetings late into the evening, and men will go to the opening of an envelope, really, you know, whereas women are much more consider much more about the value of what they're going to. So I think that again, you know, it's about technology and having the ability to have all these meetings online, and you know, generally, if I even look at some of the key issues that even investors, let's say in publicly listed companies, are putting pressure on organizations to reduce their climate change and their business travel, because that is one of the biggest issues around climate change. That is also a driver, as well as COVID, to you know, sort of change the way that people are meeting and interacting. So going back to what Aisha was saying, is if we are a much more connected world and we're going to work online, and we're not restricted by geographical boundaries of recruitment, we can hire people from all around the world, and we can recruit the best people for those roles. And you know, hardly anybody is based in a single country. That then also gives the opportunity for them to be able to tap into all of those meetings, and some of those challenges will not exist anymore. That might not come overnight, but we're definitely on that pathway to that. I think, you know, that we don't need to travel to go to business meetings anymore. How empowering and freeing is that?
So Shruti, do we want to do one more question before we finish?
Yeah, sure. I've got one more question. So we've spoken a little bit about the hard policies that companies could institute, about the importance of flexibility. I'd like to pivot a little bit and ask, you know, we had a nice discussion about the utility of the 30% critical mass figure. If that doesn't work out the way that it's intended to, what are some solutions that companies could use in its place to ensure that, you know, there are women who are qualified and deserving and not cut out of the selection process due to bias or some other reason, or who end up falling out of the leaky pipeline, as people call it? How can we move beyond that 30% and get women to sit on boards?
I think we touched on it briefly already in our discussions, right? It's about really looking into us, like what has stopped us from breaking those barriers before, right? Why were women not able to progress forward, or why did they not step forward and take those leadership roles? What was keeping them back? Yes, bias is one element, but it's not the only one. There are so many different challenges which were there, whether it's the females themselves not trusting themselves into moving forward, whether it's personal circumstances. We just mentioned in the previous question, I cannot go and travel due to cultural restrictions. How can I overcome those elements? So I think now it's the time where we look at things from an empathetic and care element, look at it as an organization, as to who do we want to be in terms of sustainability, in terms of diversity, and then look at the individual role profiles that we have and say, okay, how can we integrate flexibility on that role? Again, I said, it's not about a certain percentage to be at the top, but it's about this mindset shift that we need to evoke within the leadership level, and really bring them along the journey and tell them why is it important to have a mix of people in there. What is the equity that we can evoke in that? How does it benefit the organization? So that in the end, it doesn't matter whether you're a person of color, whether you have a different religion or different looks or different language, whatever it is, we can bring it together, and it is bringing different and better solutions to you as a result, and also economically propelling you forward as an organization.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, ladies, so much for your wonderful contributions and this lovely discussion. Ms. Yasmin is back to wrap up for us. So we thank you both. And thank you to our audience also for joining us for this discussion. Hi, Yasmin.
We can't hear you, Yasmin.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Sorry about that. Okay, so just to continue the thanks, thank you so much, Dr. Melissa, Aisha, Belinda. That was a fantastic, really engaging conversation, really brought it all to life for us all, which is often missing from the conversation when we talk about diversity. We talked about the policies and, you know, the best practice, but we also took it to the next level in terms of the implementation. So thank you. I mean, you included some excellent points today about how positive tone from the top is what will truly drive progress for diversity and inclusion in offices, and preparing women to be leaders in the workplace and working to increase diversity on boards. How diversity increases the bottom line and performance of companies, the ways in which management and employees must work together to create impactful shifts in organizational cultures, and how company policies should be reconsidered to open up multiple opportunities for employees to maximize their potential. I think despite the difficulties that COVID-19 has brought many of businesses and many of us, the outlook does look positive, and we should just continue to build upon that momentum and make sure we refrain from adjusting straight back to the normal and going back to our offices immediately. Not asking for rebellions, don't get me wrong, but we've obviously proven that, you know, working from home is a great policy. Productivity doesn't necessarily fall. In some instances, it often increases. So we have the evidence now. I'm sure that our audience will leave the webinar today with many ideas about how they can at least advocate for diversity and improved outcomes for women in their organizations, if not implement such ideas. And I urge you all to look forward to our upcoming activities and invite you to get in touch with us if you'd like to be part of our journey towards promoting diversity as a business imperative. We're glad to have you all on board, and once again, thank you so much for today. Take care, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.